high-level session of the Open Consultative Platform of the World Meteorological Organization. So my name is Gerald Fleming. I'll be your moderator today, and my biggest task will be to make sure that we all get out of here good time to accept that kind invitation from the Secretary General to join him upstairs at 1900. So I'm sure you'll all help me by doing that and keeping everything to time. I should note that in another life, I judge swimming competitions, and we learn to use stopwatches. You know, we time you to the nearest hundredth of a second. We won't be quite so severe today, but we hope that we'll all keep in time. And to keep with the sporting analogy, I believe we've got yellow and red cards and all sorts of things to show people if they run too late, you have been warned. However, in this session, we're going to explore the evolving roles and responsibilities, especially those related to national meteorological and hydrological services. Now, this Open Consultative Platform, or OCP, is an event that brings together the different stakeholders from the public, the private, the academic sectors to discuss and share our vision about the future of the global weather enterprise. The first and launching event was held just 3 years ago now during Congress. We'll call that OCP High Level 1 in June 2019. And then last year we held an online session. Now we're here again in person, thankfully in Geneva, able to meet and look each other in the whites of the eyes, so to speak, and present the third session of this mechanism for cooperation. So at this session, we'll also formally launch the second OCP white paper, which is entitled The Future of NMHS's Evolving Roles and Responsibilities. And we hope to reach out to all stakeholders with the key messages in this second white paper, which will help us to guide our future key decisions on institutional, technological, and organizational changes. We aim to collect the thoughts and views of all the stakeholders on the theme of our future activities. Now, just a few housekeeping points. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared on the WMO website in due course. When we come to the panel discussions, for those who are joining online, you can post your questions in the chat box. I understand the Q&A box will be used just for technical queries of connection problems and the like. So on the chat box, and we'll try to get to them insofar as possible. Again, I mentioned our time is limited. But first, to commence this high-level session, I would like to give the floor to Professor Petteri Tallas, Secretary General of WMO, who will, I'm sure, have some inspiring words to set the scene for us. Professor Tallas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for coming to this event physically or virtually. So we are grateful that we are finally able to gather this meeting. And I would like to thank still our members for the decision that you made at our main Congress 3 years ago, where you decided to open the doors for private sector and enhance these PPE activities of WMO. Our colleagues at the World Bank, they were stimulating us, and there was a little bit of fear that if WMO is not going to be active in this field, then World Bank might take this business over. And I think that was clear that we have to be owners of public-private partnership in the field of meteorology, hydrology, and climate activities. And now the doors have been open for the past years, and of course this pandemic has a bit slowed down our cooperation. And we have also understood that how the private sector engagement is carried out at the national level. One size doesn't fit all. We have different models in different parts of the world. Here in Europe, many Met services are having commercial arms. In USA, that's not the case, and in some Asian countries, the Met services are giving licenses to private sector to provide a set of services. And you, who are the PRs of WMO, your role is to serve the interest of the governments, not only the interest of your Met services, but the interest of the government, and that contains also private and academic sector, and also hydrology at your national level. And I think that this PPE is a great opportunity, and I foresee that there will be growing amount of private sector engagement in our business, and that's positive, and that will enhance the impact of our work. And there are large amount of additional services that can be provided. It's a joint venture between public and private sector, but also purely by private sector. And the amounts of data that we are dealing with nowadays, they are getting so large that it's important to also collaborate with private sector from that perspective. And also this chain that we have from observations to services to service provision, especially this service provision and private sector could play growing role. Of course, the public safety related issues have to remain in the hands of governments, and we are also very much supporting a legal basis for such things at the national level, and helping countries to build legal basis for that. And also this legal basis for how the private sector is engaged, that would make life much easier. So with these words, thanks for coming to this event, and I'm very much looking forward to the presentations and your views on this. And as I said, at the secretariat level, we are very positive towards wider engagement of private sector in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tallis, for that introduction to our Open Consultative Platform for our third session. Now let's welcome the President of WMO, Professor Gerhard Adrian, who will, with his keynote speech, launch the second white paper, and that white paper sets the theme of today's meeting of the OCP. He's the lead author of this white paper, and he'll present the key messages on behalf of the distinguished drafting team and the reviewers. Professor Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. About the word lead author, we could discuss later about my role here, but I'm delighted to launch the WMO OCP white paper number 2. Maybe you could go to the next slide. Number 2, on the future of, and now the title, I read it out carefully, National Meteorological or Hydrometeorological Services, and with the acronym NMS. That was a long-lasting discussion in the writing team, what we should use here, which term we should use, and at the end we used the outcome of an old discussion and the term as it is defined in the WMO convention, because that's what the main input we received, and this is also the main focus of the text. So National Meteorological or Hydrometeorological Services, NMS, evolving roles and responsibility. The white paper is a collective endeavor of more than 30 lead experts in the world. It will provide comprehensive analysis of the evolving societal needs and observed trends in the technological and operational ecosystems which NMSs operate. It will present key messages and recommendations derived from such analysis. The primary objective of this white paper is to inform key decisions on the future development of NMSs, considering risk, opportunities, and scenarios for the foreseen institutional, technological, and operational changes, and enabling better governance choices. Next slide, bitte. Slide, please, sorry. This is the list of the contributing authors and reviewers who dedicated their time and efforts for white paper number 2. The contributions of the contributing authors will be published in the second volume of this without any changes. So you could read all the original contributions, which were summarized by a synthesis presented in the first volume of this document. So this was the role of these leading experts in the drafting group. 21 leading experts provided fruitful written contribution, and more than 10 independent experts also devoted their time to review this white paper. That means this synthesis report, not the opinions and the contributions of the individual authors. I therefore believe that this white paper represents a wide spectrum of views and opinions based on different national and professional experiences and interests. I would like to take the opportunity to express my sincere appreciation for the efforts of these people. Next slide, please. This is the structure of the white paper. That means on this first volume. It's a very long white paper, so you can first capture the essence by reading the executive summary, introduction, and conclusions. It is also compiled in such a way that it does not necessarily need to be read in order from the beginning. Next slide, please. And now I will share with you the essence of the conclusions, which are comprised by key messages and recommendations. A major consideration by the drafting team and reviewers was the rapidly changing environment influenced by many external and internal factors. The ability of national meteorological or hydrological services to adapt to such changing conditions and to benefit from new technology will require agility, foresight, and change management. National meteorological or hydrometeorological services therefore must continually evolve to become more efficient, more effective, and higher performing, to remain relevant and competitive, and to fulfill their public safety mandate. In doing so, NMSs should focus on increasing the benefits of partnerships and collaborative widely across the public and private sectors, as well as with central and regional governments. Please, next slide. There's no one size fits all model, since NMSs vary significantantly. However, all NMSs have a common need to enhance the benefits they provide. For example, in the aforementioned changing environment, effort towards improving national legal frameworks should focus on defining better the mandate and functions of NMSs, along with possible stakeholders' role. It's easy to write this sentence, but it's difficult to achieve this. That's my experience. This is to ensure that NMSs are regarded as vital components of the national resilience. Another example is about data, which is a fuel for all stakeholders. Strong efforts should be made to ensure better recognition by the governments of the benefits of free and unrestricted access to NMS data, which should result in allocation of more resources to allow NMSs to provide data for socioeconomic needs. Next slide, please. The operational, changing the operational environment. The global digital drive is calling for an will lead to organizational changes and reorientation of their service delivery. Also, the public cloud and pervasive internet offer a new route to access improved forecasting skills for smaller NMSs. Therefore, development of appropriate digital strategies and research avenues is desirable. In relevant strategies and actions, realizing the opportunities for utilizing the WMO Unified Data Policy will benefit the performance of NMSs and should be prioritized. Next slide, please. Partnerships. Our progress will require inclusive multi-sectoral partnerships. Partnerships and collaboration with the private sector and academia have the potential to accelerate improvements. The sustainability of basic infrastructure is an area where opportunities are also arising. Therefore, leadership in interdisciplinary partnerships is needed. NMSs also need to embrace the concept of co-design and co-development, which will result in a better services societies. Next slide, please. International cooperation. Cooperation through WMO must continue and expand, in particular ensuring free and unrestricted international data exchange and capacity development. Regional collaborations are an extremely effective way of arising the collective performance which has been pushed forward by WMO. Bridging the capacity gap will require innovative international cooperation with a focus on delivering core information and services, in particular warning services and long-term sustainability. Next slide, please. Human resources and leadership. Particular essential aspects are leadership, talent management, and skills development. As skills to leverage partnerships is becoming increasingly important, NMS Director Career Development Planning should account for coordinating with all national stakeholders. Director of National Hydrometeorological Services should endeavor to be leaders of national weather, climate, and water enterprises. The next slide, please. These are the major key messages and recommendations excerpted from the white paper. For more details, please go to the WMO library online and find WMO publication number 1294. I will show it in my last slide. Original contributions from authors are also available, as I mentioned, and I hope that this white paper and my presentation will be useful for the future of national meteorological or hydrological services and all stakeholders, as well as for the panel discussion. And the last slide, please. There you see the link and where you find the document, and here you see all contributors to this document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Adrian, for giving us that introduction to this document. Now, the evolution of national meteorological and hydrological services has always been driven by many factors, and our very first panel topic today is around changes to operating models and the environments, and they vary across from one country to another. They change over time. The experience and perspectives of our first panel will provide insights into how they foresee factors such as the funding levels, the capabilities to absorb scientific and technological advances, and handling the increasingly multi-stakeholder landscape will impact on the roles and responsibilities of NMHSs. So the format will be that I'll briefly introduce the speakers on each panel. And if you're not familiar with their very many distinguished achievements, you'll find them all listed out there on the WMO PPE website. So I won't be narrating those as such to save time. We have 4 panelists in each of our 3 themes. Most of the panelists, I'm happy to say, are with us in person, but some will be joining us remotely. But our first panelist today is from UK, Professor Penny Endersby, permanent representative of the United Kingdom with WMO. So Penny, as an advanced national weather service with over a century and a half of history, UK Met Office activities, they cover the full value chain through weather and climate services. But we've seen other players, non-MHS players, also very active within the UK, active in the value chain. Do you think that tendency will affect how you resource your research and operational activities? And which parts of the value chain do you think that you and the UK Met Office would put more focus on in the future years?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank and congratulate Gerhard and Tatsuya and the team for drawing it together from what were some very disparate parts. And yes, you're right, we are fortunate to be a large and well-funded Met service, but even in the Met Office, we know that we're not able to be unique experts in every aspect of our work because it's just too big and complicated. And so we already do seek to partner widely at every step along the value chain with partners who can enhance or improve our capabilities and help us deliver better forecasts with greater impact. And lots of you will be familiar with Joy's law, which says that whoever you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. And if there are other people who have the advantage, then we want to work with them and not against them. But it is important to make a considered choice about what areas you are going to put your resources in and which ones you want to share or outsource. And at the Met Office, we want to be world leading in some of our core capabilities: observations, numerical weather prediction, climate modelling, guidance and advice. But even here, we have many partners from academia, our Met Office academic partnership with several universities, other Met services, and lots of them are here today in our Unified Model Partnership, and other government bodies such as our Flood Forecasting Centre, which we run with the UK's Environment Agency. And up until recently, we would have said that owning and operating our own supercomputing infrastructure would have been another of those areas where we needed to be the experts ourselves. But our recent contract with Microsoft reflects the fact that we now see this as an area where we can partner with industry to bring the best combination of expertise and capability together. And so working with Microsoft, and you're going to hear from Alberto shortly, we're building a dedicated supercomputer capability that they will operate and that's integrated directly into their Azure cloud. And moving our supercompute to be close to a public cloud provides us with opportunities to leverage the elasticity and scalability of cloud and make our now really huge data readily available to clients and partners. And we can see World Met Centres like us offering cloud-based big data platforms with web-friendly APIs to make data accessible and usable to others, including other NMHS partners. And that means that the data can be used on the cloud without the need to download it or maintain local infrastructure. And we need now to get the operating models right to let this benefit all sizes of Met services in a sustainable way. And finally, there's some other aspects of our work where we just seek to operate as competent partners alongside real experts who are maybe in the private sector or elsewhere, for example, in visualization or in serving data. And it's equally true of our media or of our digital offerings. So it's really true that we see the private sector not at all as competition, but as a route for us to enhance both our capabilities and the reach of our predictions. And that's really what we want to do with the impact we want to have.
Well, thanks for that, Penny. You've given me a great segue into our next speaker, of course, who is Professor Alberto Arribas Herranz. He's European Lead for Environmental Sustainability Science of Microsoft. So as an IT giant, Microsoft produces and provides supercomputing infrastructure and services to many applications, including helping NMHSs to better predict weather and climate. And as you know, one driver for the weather enterprise is the ever-increasing demand for more accurate and more relevant weather and climate information services. As a close partner with many NMHSs, how do you think the IT industry can best empower weather enterprises to harness that digital technology and address the increasing demands placed upon us?
Oh, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. So apologies I cannot be there in person with you today, but it's really great actually to be here, even if it is only virtually. And it's great to be here and part of this panel, also from a personal point of view, because prior to working at Microsoft, I spent many years working at National Met Services and academia. So I have had the opportunity and the privilege of seeing the world from both perspectives, the public and the private sector. And there is something that I can definitely say that there is a huge potential for collaboration here. In terms of how Microsoft can help empower National Met Service, I would like to start by recognizing what has already been said, that National Met Services are very different among themselves. So different Met Services will have different priorities, different needs, different challenges. And in Microsoft, we are well aware of the need to embrace and understand those differences so we can achieve our very own mission, which is to use technology to help others around the world to achieve more. But despite the differences across Met Services, there are also common areas where technology can help. And I would like to highlight two particular areas. So one is about research and innovation, because all of the Met Services I know, they all want to continuously improve their understanding, improve their predictions, and Microsoft can help here by bringing computational tools such as machine learning into the weather and climate challenges. And this is why we have recently created a new initiative called the Microsoft Climate Research Initiative to address and help address challenges in climate. One example is data assimilation. So machine learning can facilitate the fusion of heterogeneous data sources, and that means not only traditional data like satellite and sensors, but also unstructured data like social media. And machine learning has the potential to do this at very high resolution and to do it very fast. So that provides us with a huge opportunity to improve our understanding together and to help address new important challenges, such as real-time exposure to pollution or the tracking of CO2 emissions, which are new demands that are coming into the space of the National Met Services. The second area I wanted to highlight where technology can help is about improving the usefulness and the positive impact of weather and climate data. And Microsoft can help by enabling scalability and facilitating the integration of weather data into services. And that's why we are working with the Met Office, as Penny has just mentioned, So we can really integrate high performance computing and public cloud. And let me give you a specific example. So a company may need to do climate risk assessments, and that means that it needs data not only from climate predictions, but data on vulnerability and exposure. And combining environmental and socioeconomic data is difficult and requires sophisticated platforms and tooling. And that's the reason that Microsoft created things like the planetary computer to make this easier and really facilitate the development of applications for water management, agriculture, biodiversity, for everybody. But of course, and this is critical, the data needs to be attributed to its sources, and the business models that work for all partners need to be created. And to be frank, that's what Microsoft does in all of the sectors that we are involved in. So we do this when we work with car manufacturers. We do this when we work with game designers. So I see no reason why we cannot do the same when we work with the weather and climate sector. But this is a very important point for everybody. And finally, I just wanted to briefly mention skills, because every time I talk to any organization, including Med Services, I hear that it is difficult to attract and retain talent in technology. So one key area that we really need to address together is culture, and specifically how to create an open culture that enables people from different organizations to work together, and a culture that also facilitates that people can move across organizations and take knowledge with them to improve things. But I will stop here and really very much looking forward to hear the rest of the speakers and answering questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Of course, Microsoft is a household name, but within the world of meteorology, another household name is Vaisala. And we're fortunate to have with us here our third guest, Mr. Kai Westamo, who is President and CEO.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I am relatively new to the job. I have not met most of you. I have only been a year and a half in this, which is a very short career in this environment. I would start by saying, when now listening to the white paper presented, I'm very, very happy to see that how Vaisala is very much aligned with WMO and the National Met Institute's mission. The strong meteorological services are extremely important for their respective societies, not least for the protection of life and property. The official weather forecasts and related warnings will remain meteorological services' responsibility. Met offices will continue to play the major role in producing high-quality weather observations that serve their core mission. The accurate and reliable observations are key for forecasting continuity and warning activities. Without this foundation, the forecasts and warnings cannot be made. Meteorological services continue to be responsible for national observation networks as part of the national infrastructure. As discussed, free and unrestricted sharing of data within the community of national meteorological services in line with the WMO Resolution 40 and Unified Data Policy is a key cornerstone for creation of a global network effect for all Met offices being better able to serve their respective societies when it comes to protection of life and property. And Vaisala is very proud of being part of this as the leading observation technology player. Met Institute's observations also create additional benefits for the economic sectors in their respective societies. Global benefits can be estimated to be in billions of dollars in every year. Private sector is free to make observation in for their own purposes, but in the end, it's unlikely that they'd share this data openly in an unrestricted manner, as they create or we create this data fundamentally for specific business cases. Typically, these can be for some targeted application areas with application-specific decision-making support systems. Private sector has and will use the opportunity to provide business sector with targeted weather services and impact forecasting. A good example of An emerging such opportunity could be, for example, autonomous traffic. I don't think this is at all in contradiction with the core mission of the meteorological services. Met offices choose the means by which they produce their observations and forecast services. And it's important for each service to consider their own core activities in an evolving technology environment, as discussed. It's not always necessary to build everything in-house. After all, if we look a few decades back, Met offices built their own observation equipment in-house. Automated observations is a possibility for Met services to free their personal resources from routine observation activities to more value-added tasks. This could include the key GBON areas of upper air soundings and surface weather observations as well. Today, Met offices in many countries invest a lot in in-house software development, and this includes systems that might be available also commercially off the shelf. If I take a couple of examples of such, network management solutions, airport weather observation systems, or weather radar signal processing. I would say it is likely that this in-house development will gradually reduce in the future as it will become more commercially available, and it is not necessarily part of NMS's core mission. In a summary, I would say Met services and the private sector benefit mutually in their individual strengths in maintaining and developing beneficial services for their societies globally. In conclusion, I would say we are in this journey together. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts, Mr. Oistamo. Now, for the last speaker on this panel, we're going back online and we're going to China, where our last speaker is Mr. Yang Yu, Deputy Administrator of the China Meteorological Administration, CMA. Now, CMA is known for its significant role in delivering both public and specialized services to a huge variety of customers. So, Mr. Yu, how will CMA's role in service delivery evolve with the growing domestic market of weather business and an increasing number of private service providers in China? What are the core services that you think CMA is going to focus on?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Senior White Paper better explains the future roles played by NMSs and also our responsibilities. The CMA is the National Met Service Authority and is responsible for assisting DRR-related policy making for the government and Met forecast and hazard warning services for the general public, as well as tailor-made and dedicated Met service for various sectors to promote socioeconomic development. Therefore, we formulate China's meteorological development policies and regulates the Met service sector. In the past April, the State Council of China published the 2022 to 2035 guideline on fostering high-quality meteorological development, which specified the pathway and objectives of this development. CMA strives to achieve sophisticated monitoring, precise forecasting, and a tailored service to promote the digital and smart transformation of Met service, with focus in 4 areas in particular. First, safeguarding lives. Efforts will be made to improve the Met hazard monitoring and early warning system to target specific hazards and key sectors, and to conduct reviews of hazard risks to develop impact-based forecast and risk warnings, so as to have in place a warning-led chain mechanism. Second, enabling robust production. The Met Plus Empowering Action Plan will be implemented to provide enhanced, precise, and professional services to Met-sensitive sectors, including agriculture, ocean, and transportation. Third, creating a better life for all. Service supply will be improved to have a service system that covers both the urban and the rural areas and provides personalized and tailor-made service available while ensuring the universal accessibility of a public Met service. Fourth, promoting a sound ecosystem. Climate change monitoring and evaluation will be strengthened to better protect the ecosystem and restore Met barriers while promoting the reasonable utilization of climate resources. In June this year, we published new policy documents to better nurture the set service market and to engage various players to provide guided Met service, which includes, first of all, optimize the policy environment to promote the gradual opening of Met data resources of different classes. Second, to improve the regulations so as to have a better monitoring and evaluation system in place, ensuring a market environment that encourages fair competition. Third, to better engage the private sector and to establish and improve government purchasing mechanism of Met service and encourage the private sector to be a service provider in this sector. We therefore recommend that WMO, in promoting public-private partnership, to uphold the utmost principle of safeguarding global public interest while seeking the common development of capacity of its members, setting the international rules to be observed by both NMSs and the private sector, and therefore guiding the engagement of the private sector in an appropriate manner and ultimately elevating the Met service capabilities around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yu, and thank you especially for staying up so late in the evening, indeed into tomorrow morning, as it is, I think, now in China. So now we have a few minutes to take some questions or points from the audience. We ask you please to keep these very short. I think I see Mr. Konate here would like to make a comment.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like just to make a small contribution, and I would like to share with you a success story with regards to the public-private engagements, which was taking place with regards to design, build, operate environment, which was financed by a development agency. And our Iranian government. And this project in particular was done in partnership with the Special Agency of Cote d'Ivoire, and this is an organization which we had to reinforce the capacity in terms of the National Meteorological Service. This project consisted of an element which was aimed at the modernization of the meteorological services and the infrastructure and the information system, and also the creation of a special institution for forecasting, which would be rather developed. And this also relates to the creation of a special system of equipping for the system, which was established and installed at the end of the project. I would like also to take this opportunity to, Mr. Moderator, to thank the Secretariat of the World Meteorological Organization, which supported this project in terms of technical assistance and the implementation in particular. This is a very important role which allowed us to implement this project, advance on it in order to advance on the implementation of this partnership with the private sector. Mr. President is here with us out of this area, and I would like to present the success story with us in terms of public-private partnership, and would like to tell us a few words about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Konate. This 27 million euro project is the concretization of a long-term partnership effort with Sodexam in Côte d'Ivoire. It also reflects the oncoming of a new era with design, build, operate projects funded by development partners. At last, we managed to have projects running all across the value chain, implemented for the benefit of the NMHSs for sovereignty, cost effectiveness, and higher sustainability. I'm convinced that the WMO community needs more PPE projects of this kind. We can make it happen together. MFI, as the pioneer in integrated project and PPE DBO approach, is proud to be part of this new agreement and eager to work side by side with Sodexo in general and President of Region 1 in particular. Thank you, Dauda.
Thank you, colleagues, for telling us about that. We have a brief moment. I think the voice of hydrology wishes to take the floor, Mr. Jan Danielke. Jan.
Okay, my question is not hydrological at all. My question, with a changing environment and possibilities and a lot of information, you may find a lot of things just in this small device. And we heard about core business or core activities and functionalities of the National Meteorological Services that I think it's a customer or user who decides what he or she will use. And if he finds something more suiting his purpose in this device, he don't recognize the core activity. So what he recognized or she recognized is the added value of service that we're providing. So my question is, what is the added value in the future? What should be the added value of National Meteorological and Hydrological Services? And is it different for the big ones and the middle and small services? Just curious about your opinion.
Thanks for that, Jan. I'll ask Penny to maybe address that, as UK Met Office is certainly active in many parts of the value chain, as we mentioned. So that question of added value is really important.
Yes, it's a wonderful question, Jan, and I have to be quick for the sake of the other panels. But I think we see that we can add that value in many different forms according to what clients want all down that chain. And for some people, they'll take the value direct from the science or the observations data, some from the raw model output, some from the post-processed, some from fusing our forecasts with their own requirements. And so we're really looking to some of those further down the value chain, we're looking to quite different markets with customers who might want quite different things. And the other thing I could mention is they may not be human. They may be algorithms or machines that are ingesting our data and creating new value from it. So for the large Met service that works all the way, there's a plethora of different sorts of customers and different sorts of market models, and some of those are evolving very quickly.
Thanks for that, Penny. I see some questions here, but in the interest of time, I think we need to move on and move to the second theme of the evening. Now, a key factor for any NMHS, indeed for all stakeholders, is the legislative, the policy, and the institutional framework within which we almost work. And these, of course, vary quite significantly from one country to another. So we're going to explore some of these frameworks now, how they need to be adapted to accommodate the evolving roles of all the different players within the weather enterprises, but especially focused on the NMHS. Again, I'll just briefly introduce the four contributors. So firstly, let me introduce to you Mr. Hasegawa, who's permanent representative of Japan with WMO. Mr. Hasegawa, what's your legal and institutional system's underlying concept, and how does the JMA Director General's role, how is that prescribed in the relevant law, and how has your agency been promoting public-private engagement by evolving this legal and institutional framework over time? How would you like to see that evolve for other countries?
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. And so I'm very much happy and honored to be here. The Meteorological Service Act in Japan was actually, it's interesting that it was formulated on the premise that the collaboration of public, private, and academic sectors is essential from the beginning. And this basic idea hasn't changed. Its purpose is the sound development of meteorological services. And here the services include public and private weather services. And therefore, as the Director General of the Japan Meteorological Agency, I'm not only responsible for the development of JMA services, but also for that of the private services. The Act itself does not detail the roles to be played by the private sector, except that private sector cannot issue warnings to ensure a single voice by JMA. The capabilities and services of private sector are constantly evolving, and therefore the collaboration framework has been reviewed and updated from time to time. The point here is that this review has been always based on the close communication between the sectors, typically through an advisory committee consisting of experts from public, private, and academic sectors. The current basic concept on the roles to be played by public and private sectors was set up in 1992. And there, JMA only provides fundamental public services to protect life and properties, whereas the private sector is to provide customized services to meet diverse needs based on the data and products that JMA provides. As a regulator, JMA does not provide commercial services to avoid competition and conflict of interest. About the future, in 2018, we set the vision for meteorological services in 2030, based on the recommendation by the advisory committee that I mentioned earlier. In order for the public, private, and academic sectors to collaborate with each other, we need to have common goals and objectives. And I believe that this vision serves well as the foundation of our collaboration. We aim at the society where the data are used together with data in other sectors like retail, transport, demography, to make our life better in all aspects. To this end, JMA will continue improving our warnings and decision support activities for disaster prevention. And at the same time, we are striving in collaboration with our partners to promote the use of weather data, for example, by applying new technologies like cloud to the data sharing framework, or by making adjustments to the regulation for quality assurance of weather information. We believe that such collaboration efforts will lead to the realization of the society described in our vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. And it's really interesting to hear of that very long period that you have with legislation. It's quite unique, almost very few countries, I think, have that. So we're turning now to Jim Anderson, who's chairman of the Association of Hydrometeorological Industry, HMEI. And Jim, I know that you're active also within your company with many, many countries in the developed and the developing world. So what kind of institutional environment would you like to see for all of us that would better leverage the power of the public, the private, academic, and indeed the civil sectors of society in addressing all the various and very many social and economic challenges, and that would encourage us to work in a mutually supportive and complementary manner?
Great, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody. And I think it's always worth stating that and acknowledging that no matter what part of the global weather enterprise we come from, whether it's academic or the private sector, government sector, et cetera, that we all come to it with the same objectives in mind, to help improve human thriving and sustainability. And I think sometimes in these discussions around what's the right institutional framework and who should be doing what, we lose sight of that fact that we're all, and everybody I know in the private sector feels the same way as folks in the government sector. We're really supporting the same higher level objectives and aspirations. And we may come from different parts of it, but we have different strengths, but they're very complementary in the end. And obviously with climate change, the urgency and importance of pursuing these endeavors and bringing as much energy and resources to bear on them as possible. This is an all hands on deck response is needed at this time. And we all bring different sources of capital, whether that be investment capital, human capital, technical capital, et cetera. And the private sector can bring some of that, but so can all the other members of the global weather enterprise. From the industry's perspective and representing HMEI, which has about 140 private sector members, things that would help the private sector engage more fully and bring more to bear to solve these common problems that we're all trying to address. One is clear legal frameworks and consistent rules of the road. We often find that we may be operating in countries where there are policies that are perhaps prohibit private sector engagement, or there are no policies. So we operate in sort of a vague environment where it's customary for private sector to engage in certain ways, but not in others, but there's no legal certainty around it. And so all these types of things create friction or uncertainty that limits private sector engagement and the investment of our capital and resources that we can bring to bear to solve these problems. Two, and certainly the WMO has worked hard to address this, to provide a common data policy that allows for the distribution of government-owned data for the private sector, for them to be able to use it to serve their customers, but also distinguishes government-owned data from private data and enables and incentivizes the private sector to deliver more of that data to solve and collect more of that data to solve various problems. And I really like some of the comments that were made earlier regarding the collaboration that can happen around all these things and figuring out exactly where the private sector can play and be the most complementary and provide the best support to the national mission that national Met Hydromet agencies have. And then finally, one more thing I would add is for lack of a better word, reform of the program management and procurement rules associated with large capacity development projects, primarily funded by the international donor community and the development community. And we really, to do this, to really ensure successful implementation and long-term operation of context-appropriate technologies and services that have a much higher success rate and help really build capacity for climate change mitigation, adaptation, resiliency, and sustainability in these countries. And this would include having longer-term funding streams rather than very episodic, funding mechanisms that principally fund hardware and infrastructure for short periods of time, to be able to do that for longer periods of time. Also, the funding of services, that surround the technical infrastructure. So whether that's, training services, maintenance, operation, capacity development, and continued ongoing support of services. Also, just the delivery of data services or software services in areas where it doesn't make sense to deploy infrastructure. And then finally, and this is something that HMEI has worked on a great deal with the World Bank and the World Meteorological Organization, is the use of standardized tender specifications as part of this overall program management, procurement reform kind of initiatives. And in the examples of these have now been generated and are beginning to be used, but to accelerate the adoption of more standardized methods and tender specifications and procurement procedures would be great in this area. So I think that's my comments for today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Jim. I think we all recognize these questions of funding and sustainability as being very, very key, whether we come from private, public, or whatever sector. So that brings us actually to Dr. Agnes Kijazi, the third Vice President of WMO and Permanent Representative of the United Republic of Tanzania. So Agnes, are the functions of your NMHSs, the warnings, issuing warnings, operating infrastructure, do you think they're well recognized by the public and by the financial authorities, if you wish, in your own countries? And if so, how are your functions supported by legislation and strategic planning? And what role do you think the private sector, and in particular probably here the media, might play in issuing and disseminate, not so much in issuing, but in disseminating early warnings?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And maybe before I answer your question, I have a general comment that the meteorological law in Tanzania was enacted in 2019. And this law governs provision and regulation of weather and climate services in the United Republic of Tanzania. And the act has mandated the TMA to provide weather and climate services, including early warning to the general public, and also provide tailor-made services to socioeconomic sectors within the country. TMA is also mandated by the law to provide regulatory functions on all meteorological activities undertaken by stakeholders in the United Republic of Tanzania. And this law give room for the private sector to be involved in the provision of meteorological services, and the private sector can install instruments for observation of the climatic parameters, and they can undertake specific meteorological services within the country, but for specific use. However, the private sector cannot issue warnings to the public, but they can disseminate warnings issued by TMA. Hence, through TMA Act number 2 of 2019, TMA remains to be the sole authoritative voice for issuing warnings related to weather and the climate in the country. For other types of hazards, the directive of the law is to engage relevant stakeholders so as to issue a multi-hazard early warning system in the country. And the enforcement of the law and the involvement of private sector has significantly improved the weather and climate services in the country, with the socioeconomic benefit to various sectors of the economy. Now coming to your question, I can say yes, the functions of the Tanzania Meteorological Authority, TMA, are well recognized by both the government as the main financial and the general public. Trends of follow-up of TMA services, especially warnings by stakeholders, including general public, show exponential growth. Rate of vandalism of meteorological infrastructure has decreased, which is the sign of recognition by general public of the services issued by TMA. The budget allocated for meteorological infrastructure by the government has increased, which shows how the government recognizes the value of climate services in the country. And for the case of legislation and the strategic plan, in your question, I can say that the functions of TMA are stipulated in Article 5 of the Tanzania Meteorological Authority Act number 2 of 2019. Under this article, the law has mandated TMA to provide both public goods and commercial services in relation to meteorology. Therefore, stakeholders who use meteorological services commercially are required by the law to contribute some amount as the cost recovery, since a large amount, including infrastructure, is covered by the government. Furthermore, the Tanzania Meteorological Authority 5 years medium-term strategic plan 2020-2025 is prepared in line with the law. Hence, it took into consideration the need to involve both the government as the main financier of public good and the other commercial stakeholders in financing weather and climate activities in the country. And this includes also the aviation sector. This is commercial, and they have to contribute some amount to the agency. It also took note of involving private sector to deliver specific activities of the authority so as to ensure sustainability of weather and climate services in the planned 5 years plan. And for the last part, whether the private sector, including media, play the part in disseminating early warning, I can say that Tanzania Meteorological Authority number 2 of 2019 recognize private sector, including media, in dissemination of weather and climate forecast and warnings to the general public. Article 31(1) directs TMA to issue weather and climate forecast and warning for public consumption through media. Also, Article 5H directs TMA to cooperate with other institutions and the authorities involved in meteorology and related field in the aspect of training, studies, research, environment, climate variability, and change. Hence, you can see that the role of private sector is clearly defined in the TMA Act number 2 of 2019. Thank you.
Thank you for that exposition of the roles and responsibilities as you have them in Tanzania. Now we're turning now back to the private sector. Our last speaker is Mr. Joachim Schug, who's head of house and senior meteorologist at DTN Switzerland. DTN not only provide weather information services to many users, but they also have a data collaboration with public partners, including Meteo Suisse. And Meteo Suisse has established a quality control framework that labels data from other observation network operators based on their level of compliance with WMO standards. So if I could ask Dr. Schug, how do you perceive the opportunities and risks around incorporating more private weather data providers into the WMO framework of technical standards and regulations? We're not hearing sound at this time. Just see if we can sort out this technical glitch briefly. No, we're not hearing any sound.
Ask him to log out.
Yep. I think if we could ask you to log out, sir, and we'll come back to you later, if that's okay, because clearly there seems to be some problem with the technical connection, and perhaps resetting it, the old hard reboot that we used to talk about in computers would help us in that context. And apologies for the difficulties. Probably I'll use this occasion to turn again to some questions, and we've had a couple coming in from the chat, and an interesting one, which probably relates more to our earlier question, our earlier theme, is whether space weather activities are likely to be a major component of NMHS activities in the future, or indeed where should they lie? Because I think many of us are aware of the possible risks and so on that come from space weather. I'm not sure if anybody wants to take that one, take that ball.
So space weather is a part of our
yes.
national remit, and we do provide it. It's a different skill, undoubtedly. We've just had the pleasure of having some representatives from the South African Met Service who are setting up their own space weather capability and helping them train at the moment. It's fairly niche, but it is a threat to our digital systems, our communication systems, our satellites. And so it's a good thing that we are able as Met Services to provide it. And I don't know anyone else who is doing this on behalf of the public or the private on the same level. So it's still very much developing capability, I think, for the whole globe.
I know it's well developed in the US, not under the National Weather Service, but under, I think it's NOAA, but
related
organization,
organization, yes.
An interesting one. What I'm going to do now is, because I want to be able to get back to Mr. Schug, if that's possible, but I think if we go on to the third theme and talk with the contributors there, and then try to come back to him at the end, when hopefully we'll have had an opportunity to sort out, or unless I just call him in there now. Can you? No, I don't think he's listening. Okay. So our third theme is very broad ranging. Looks at human resources, looks at the evolution of your roles, the roles of many of you as PRs, as representatives of all of meteorology in their countries, and how global and regional cooperation might impact on how NMHS has handled their evolving roles. So our first speaker is Dr. Albert Klein-Tank. He's director of the Hadley Centre in the UK, of course, a well-known Centre for Climate Change Research. So if I could ask Dr. Albert, how do you foresee the academic and the research community contributing to and keeping pace with the growing demands on the weather enterprise to provide better decision support systems and services, such as climate change adaptation and mitigation services?
Thank you very much. All right. So thank you for the invitation and good afternoon. So first of all, I wish to congratulate Professor Gerhard Adrian and the entire author team for completing the white paper on the future of NMHSs. And I must say, I'm really pleased with the science background to see the voice of science and research included both in the paper and at this meeting. So my main message for today, responding to the question, is that I think it's really important NMHs need to work in partnership with a multidisciplinary science community. And we need this partnership to be able to provide adequate decision support to inform climate solution across society. I think that the changing risk of extreme events that we see today illustrates how existing weather warnings need to be complemented with newly developed climate services. And developing these services clearly needs research and innovation. And at the UK Met Office in the Hadley Centre, which I'm heading, we contribute to this collaboration in collaboration with academic partners, both in the UK and international. So to respond to the threats posed by changing climate, our science program has really moved from defining the problem to enabling solutions. So we develop projections to help local adaptation decisions. And we also develop the models to assess greenhouse gas budgets and climate warming targets in the light of the Paris Agreement. And I think from the science perspective, these are really exciting times. There is so much going on. Climate model simulations at very detailed spatial resolution, which enable significant weather events to be simulated, large model ensembles to enable detailed risk assessment of extreme events, and improved simulation of very complicated processes in the climate system, such as ice sheets. So in addition to that, there is, of course, what you mentioned earlier today, the exascale computing, cloud technology, machine learning, and digital twins. I think altogether, this is really exciting, but if you really look at the pull through of the latest science into operational climate services that partially delivered by NMSs and also by the private sector, I think there is still a lacking of a lot of information despite many pilot projects. And to address these challenges, the challenges of climate change, I think we need to build more collaboration with practitioners in policy planning and business in areas such as hydrology, agriculture, economics, and human behavior. So summing up in conclusion, I'm really keen that we closely collaborate with NMSs, between NMSs and multidisciplinary science community. And only through this collaboration, we can provide adequate decision support to manage the risk of high impact weather events, I think. And we can also then increase our resilience for climate change and for other risks. I'm convinced that if we do this, that will help us support the solutions agenda, both for mitigation and adaptation. And I'll leave it here and thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, and hopefully we'll come to some questions at the end of the few other contributions to this particular theme. You raised the question of skills there, and it's certainly a huge problem across the meteorological world, particularly in the developing world, about how highly skilled and talented people are retained in the public sector. So we're turning now to Dr. Andrew Johnson, who's permanent representative of Australia from Region 5. Andrew, what do you think are the essential skills and competencies that NMHSs need to keep and develop in the coming decade to fulfill their future roles and responsibilities? And how can they best retain those skilled and talented workers when there's a huge commercial booming sector out there in weather and in IT also, who can often offer better job opportunities and higher levels of payment? How are we going to solve this?
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I think firstly, the thing that troubles me most is the premise of the question that somehow NHMSs in the private weather sector are in competition for talent. I think no matter where you are in the weather enterprise, we're in a very competitive environment for talent. And indeed, NHMSs and private weather companies should be working together and not in competition with one another, and actually seek to be in competition with the rest of the world that's competing for the same talent. So I think it's important that that's recognised. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I think there are at least 4 fundamental things that are vital to acknowledge when we're thinking about talent. And the first, and others have spoken about this earlier, is around offering a compelling purpose, providing people with a job offering that gives them the opportunity to have significant impact, whether it's at a local community level, with industries, whole countries, and indeed some cases the whole world. So the compelling purpose and mission is essential, because we're never going to be able to compete for money. Even the private weather companies will not be able to compete on a monetary basis with other sectors in society. So that mission and purpose is essential. Flexibility, the ability to work anywhere, from anywhere, at any time. I think COVID has shown us many things, but one thing it has shown is that the nature of work has changed, and that the expectations of employees, both current and future, has also changed. And we need to adapt to that if we're going to attract and retain the very best people. The third is around opportunity. Again, a couple of colleagues have touched on this already. So I think, again, this notion that people join an organisation and stay there for their whole life no longer holds. So how do we provide the opportunity for people to move in and out and across organisations at multiple times in their career? And then lastly, around diversity and inclusion, that people want to come and work in a place that values diversity and that is safe, and a workplace where they can bring their true self to work. So I think if we can pay attention to those 4 principles, it'll put us in good shape to attract the best people in the world to the things that we think are important.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. Indeed, we should not try to be in competition with each other, but the business market is what it is. Now we turn now to welcome Mr. Jonathan Porter, who's Senior Vice President and Chief Meteorologist of AccuWeather. Jonathan, there's now a very diversified ecosystem of weather and climate services at national and global levels, and you're part of a global weather company. How would AccuWeather expect the functions and the roles of NMHS directors to evolve and adapt so as to maximize social economic benefits for their countries from a more broad-based and inclusive weather and climate services ecosystem?
Well, good afternoon, and I think that's a very important topic, and I want to thank the WMO for the invitation. It's an honor to be this afternoon. The important and varied role for NMHS directors around the world will continue to evolve given the increased focus by the WMO on building those complementary partnerships between governments and private sector worldwide to achieve win-win strategic partnerships and outcomes that really keep people safer, reduce injuries and fatalities, as well as helping people, governments, and companies avoid financial loss from weather and climate disasters. And we know there's an urgency to this critical work given the increasing impacts from weather and climate disasters globally. AccuWeather has had the great pleasure of working with NMHS directors globally for decades, and I find these leaders to be some of the most passionate, creative, caring, and dedicated members of the global weather enterprise. NMHS directors have and will continue to embrace a larger role in not only running their agencies, but also importantly, being the inspirer in chief and the strongest advocates at the national level for successful, mutually beneficial public-private sector engagement. In the context of the new WMO Unified Data Policy, NMHS directors have the important opportunity to prioritize funding and resources for reliable distribution in their own countries, really redefining the importance of the NMHS as the central hub for this mission-critical data, the fuel for the entire weather enterprise, as was discussed earlier in our session. And I think as such, in order to be successful, the NMHS director role is now even more outwardly facing in order to help facilitate the positive partnerships with other government agencies and the private sector so that the true impact and value of the NMHS can be better understood and fully realized. This can be accomplished in part by, for example, urging public warnings to be classified as the core data in your country and disseminated in CAP format. This enhances the visibility, awareness, and brand recognition of the NMHS as the single authoritative voice on official government warnings to as many residents and tourists in your country as possible. This is especially important given that in many countries, the vast majority of people today receive their weather content from the media and private sector as opposed to directly from the NMHS. AccuWeather, who is celebrating our 60th anniversary this September, has had a key focus on partnering with NMHSs around the world to prominently present NMHS-sourced weather warnings to all of our global users. A key part of the AccuWeather mission is to save lives, protect property, and help people prosper, which is very well aligned with the missions of NMHS organizations. Today at AccuWeather, we've integrated the official warnings for 70 countries and territories into the widely used and freely available AccuWeather digital properties, available in over 200 languages and dialects globally. These warnings, importantly, always clearly delineate that they're from the NMHS with the agency logo and other clear attribution, strengthening the NMHS branding. Additionally, directors should also hold frequent collaborations with weather industry to arrive at the definition of core data in your country, and recognizing that will need to evolve over time. Encourage discussion formally and informally with the private sector, civil protection, broadcast meteorologists, and other partners. Many benefits will accrue from these new understandings and learnings, including improved trust. This will be increasingly important as rapid technology change continues to drive changes in how the sectors collaborate and work together most effectively to generate the best products and services for citizens, business, and society. We talked about the importance of open data earlier. Making data available as much as possible is critical. Putting foundational data in the hands of innovators on an equal opportunity basis drives many positive impacts. Much wider use of the data and therefore recognition of the government NMHS in ways that you might not even be able to imagine today. Talking about and encouraging the success stories as we've done today is really critical too, because that will inspire additional positive collaboration. Finally, I think it's really important to think about how the private sector can be more helpful in advocating for increased government investment in core public infrastructure and capacity development. The private sector wants to be more helpful in this area. For example, here at AccuWeather, we share metrics about our reach with partners so they can see how much of a wider audience their weather warnings are being displayed on our platforms and how many more people the NMHS is reaching through AccuWeather's digital platforms. We've had so many of our users comment to us when a country's warnings are integrated into the AccuWeather digital platform, I didn't even know my country produced these helpful warnings. In conclusion, I'm very excited about the opportunity to strengthen existing partnerships and build new productive partnerships between the NMHS and the private sector globally. I'm very proud of all the important work that we as a global weather enterprise have done together in the past and what we can do together tomorrow with an increased focus on collaboration. This is work that's ever more important as the world is relying on our forecast, warnings, and insights as we face increasing impacts from extreme weather globally. Reflecting over recent years, significant progress has been made. We can do so much more together, and people around the world will benefit from our strong collaboration. Our work matters. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for those words. And I think given that you have emphasized collaboration, this might be a good time to go back to DTN and Mr. Schug. I gather the technical people have been working in the background, hopefully to clear up the gremlins that have been affecting the line. So if I could turn to you, Mr. Schug, and I won't repeat the full question, but it's about the question of private data providers and how they can contribute best within the NMHS and WMO framework.
Hello, hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you. Excellent. Great.
Okay. Sorry again for this technical problem. Hello, and thank you all for inviting you to this panel. My name is Joachim Schug. I'm a senior meteorologist still an operational forecaster, and in addition, head of House of DTN Switzerland. We are responsible for the German-speaking market of DTN. DTN is a leading private global weather company. DTN, as I already mentioned, global private weather company, global data analytics technology company, delivers actionable operational intelligence to organizations with complex supply chains. That's not poor weather forecast. We go more to the customers, in the business, and we serve customers in over 123 countries of the world, focusing agriculture, energy, and weather-sensitive industries, especially in transport. While there are clear distinctions in public and private weather organizations, there are a lot of instances where collaboration between private and national weather services improves addressing societal issues such as risk mitigation, safety, and sustainability. Let me give two brief examples of this partnership through risk communications. One example is from Switzerland. DTN Switzerland has a very dense in-house network of automatic surface weather stations, roughly 380 automatic weather stations in this tiny country. This network gives our forecasts for sure a database for precise local risk communication, but these data are also shared with the National Meteorological Service, MeteoSwiss, to cover gaps in their network. It's a cost-effective use of public money and improves the warning system and the safety of the citizens of Switzerland. This treasure trove of data are also shared with research institutes. There are a lot of theses done with our data. And what's most important, to answer your question, most of our stations are operated according to WMO standards. This allowing a constant monitoring of the quality of our network and also from the MeteoSwiss, and also monitoring of the quality of our forecasts and the warnings. So it's a really good example that also a private weather company can build up a private network of automatic stations operated according to WMO standards. And this not only for 1 year, our network is now in operation since nearly 15 years. A second good example of private-public partnership is that we do in coordination with the National Weather Service in the United States and the municipal meteorologist. DTN provides risk communications for the New York City emergency management in severe weather planning. DTN meteorologists have a deep expertise in municipal operation and community impact. They offer the kind of situational awareness that supports critical operational and safety decisions being made on a hyperlocal level while conditions are changing. In this way, we support the safety and well-being of the citizens of New York City and its infrastructure. We expect more cities to adopt this model of a cooperation as extreme weather increasingly challenges traditional responses. These were just two short examples of the cooperation between National Met Service and private weather companies. As climate is changing and extreme weather is challenging our world, collaboration between public and private weather organizations, as well as stakeholders, will increase to advance science, research, and development, and to be of greater benefit to our global society. So just two nice examples of this nice collaboration partnership. And once again, sorry for the technical problem, and thank you very much for your attention.
No, indeed. Thank you. And we're very glad that we were able to bring you in and hear your views. And thank you for persisting and staying with us. So our final panelist is here with us in person, Courtney Dragon, who's Director of International Affairs with the National Weather Service of the United States. And we've been talking about data, Courtney, and the Unified Data Policy. It's a landmark initiative of global cooperation under the WMO framework. And we all know that the National Weather Service has always provided free access to data and products supporting public and commercial interests and also academic research. So from the US perspective, what's your advice on how we can increase the governmental recognition of those benefits that come with free and unrestricted access to NMHS data?
Thank you, and thanks for the organizers of this panel and my fellow panelists. This is a great question, and the short answer to get you to that lovely Swiss wine is we don't do it, our partners do. But I appreciate that you probably would like me to walk through that logic a bit. So while we in the meteorological, hydrological, climatological community see, and we all understand the necessity and benefits of data sharing, in the US, we depend on the support of our external partners, including the private sector, the academic sector, first responders, to advocate for resources for our agency. These are the same resources that fund our observing systems that provide this data. This has been and continues to be an ongoing conversation annually within the United States. And so I'll walk through some of the arguments that have been successful for us. So to start, the insight and foresight about the state of our planet is factored into everything we do, into our individual decisions and our collective decisions, from what we wear each day to things like national security. Societies rely on our predictions and services to get this information, and our observing systems are the vital foundation for what we do. The weather forecasting system must have an assured and uninterrupted flow of quality data from these systems, and ensuring this is an inherently governmental function. To fulfill our mission at home, though, we need international collaboration. An accurate forecast 3 days or more in advance can be made only when the entire globe is observed, both from in situ and remote sensing satellites. So no single entity, no government, no university, no one company can do this alone. And so therefore, a global system of systems has emerged, which maximizes data sharing. We continually maintain to our lawmakers that weather forecasting is also an inherently global enterprise for 2 reasons. So first, our forecasting models require observations from the entire globe, as I just mentioned, but it benefits our national citizens and society. Weather patterns over Asia affect the west coast of the United States. Europe watches what happens in the United States because it's coming their way. Asia continues to watch, and then the circle closes with the US watching what comes from Asia. Similarly, weather off the coast of Africa could spawn hurricanes in the Atlantic basin. So all of these data are vital to the United States, to our global security, to the protection of life and property, and to our commercial interests, just as those data are vital to national wet services around the world. So this is why we share US data freely and openly, so that we can receive data freely and openly from our international partners. The benefit of full, free, and open data for the United States is that by volume, we receive about 3 times as much data as we put into the system. So basically, that's why we have an open data policy. So the second and further down the value chain is that NOAA's environmental data and model output has been found to fuel a very vibrant and growing private sector enterprise in the United States. Just like with observing the globe, with service delivery, we simply can't do it alone. Society's demands on our services are greater than our one national weather service in the United States can provide. According to the University Cooperation for Atmospheric Research, the private sector in the US is estimated to generate billions of dollars of annual revenue, employ thousands of people, and provide a rich array of products and tailored services. A portion of this revenue, in the form of taxes in the United States, is in turn then used to fund the public sector budgets, including for NOAA, those same budgets that provide the observing systems that then provide the data that we share. The health of this industry is underwritten by that convention of full, free, and open data. This industry does not threaten the mandate or the role of the US Weather Service. It relies on us for its foundational data and information to further secure our mission and funding to the US. Thus, they in turn find that it's beneficial to advocate for the National Weather Service, the resources that we get in turn. So we recognize that this may not be the same for all countries. There's a wide range of national legislative frameworks, approaches to the private sector cooperation and observing capabilities. But I hope some of these rationale were helpful in answering this question and to giving you insight into why we advocate for open data, but also the arguments that have been useful within our government for both that open data and increasing partnership across the enterprise. Thanks. Oh, and so sorry, Mr. Moderator. Apologies in advance. I think my current director and past director would be really upset if I didn't clarify that it is the National Weather Service that does space weather prediction out of our Space Weather Prediction Center. So, thank you.
Thanks for that, Courtney. Yes, certainly data is the lifeblood of science anyway, in general, and certainly of meteorology. Now, we do have time for perhaps one brief question if anybody is itching to put one. I do actually have one from the chat. Interesting view that in the opinion of the person who's asked this, there should be two separate and clear functions of NMHSs. One, to develop national legislation or to influence development of national legislation about the hydrometeorological market. And second, to be a leader in the market, providing hydromet services for government and public awareness and responses, and suggests that the challenge for WMO is to support national Met services to achieve both in both of those roles. So that's perhaps something of an ask. I'm not sure if anybody wants to take that. Professor Adrian, we will certainly hand you the floor.
Yes, sorry. My feeling from my observation from the discussion this evening is that this discussion is very somehow biased in one direction, how the private sector could support national meteorological or hydrological services. We should also think about the other direction. I think that's what I'm missing in this direction. For instance, in the UMETSAT framework, we were discussing on radio occultation data purchased by a private company. But without the development of this observing system, of this concept, without providing data assimilation systems in the NWP, this would not make any sense for the private sector to offer such things. So we have also the other way around. This is an example where that the public sector or public funded organizations develop new technology which could be taken later by the private sector to be offered, let's say, on a broad perspective. I think we should keep this also in mind. Of course, one necessary condition, that's my personal experience or observation in my home country, is, of course, for this, the private sector needs the security for investments. That means that we need a clear interface between the public sector and the private sector. And that's not only an issue for the meteorological services, it is in general the understanding of the government, of their role in the society, in the economy, or let's say also the understanding of the government, what is expected from the National Meteorological Services. And I could tell you, with a free and open data policy, together with a clear act defining our tasks, we are now suddenly an interesting partner for the private sector to develop new services where we as National Meteorological Service will never be active. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think one of the messages from that is fundamentally communication is at the heart of so many problems, and understanding each other's perspectives and what each other's needs is a really important part of working together in a complementary fashion and not seeing each other as opposed in any sense. I think at this stage, because we need to think about wrapping up fairly soon, but we've covered wide themes with all of these three panels, and I'd like to thank the panelists for your contribution and those online too for your persistence. And indeed, we've had something like 150 participants listening in, and that's great. But we have now Mr. Kimura, pardon me, Tatsuya, I should have practiced that beforehand. Director of the Public-Private Enterprise Office, Engagement Office of WMO, will briefly summarize the key messages that we have listened to over the past 90 minutes or thereabouts.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, panelists, for very thought-provoking comments and recommendations. I'm very pleased to share with you some key messages provided for the last one and a half hour. So one is that NMHS's research and the private sector continue to benefit mutually through partnerships. This is a very common positive message that we have received. Also, partner widely at every step of the value chain would be what we are seeking. And opportunities for innovative public-private partnership around the use of technology are expanded. This is what, you know, Albert and many others shared. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I cannot proceed. Okay. Key message number 2. Rapidly changing environment has underlined the need for policies and legislation, and a clear legal basis and consistent rules supports the sound development of meteorological services across industry, academia, and government. We need to institutionalize sustained funding for operations, and private sector, other partners can help advocate the importance of such fundamental infrastructure, as you know, many people here called for it. And legal and policy framework also ensure that NMHSs will be regarded as vital components of national resilience and as the authoritative source of relevant data and information. And we will work together for people's safe, safe and people's life and property. The last page is this: digital strategies and research avenues are thought, because there are many new things to think about. The NMHS director role is now even more outward looking and facilitate win-win partnerships, reciprocity, and WMO Unified Data Policy. With WMO Unified Data Policy, NMHS directors redefine the importance of the NMHSs as the hub for reliable, rapid, and unrestricted foundational data distribution. So finally, successful arguments for partnerships and free and unrestricted data exchange, our ability to monitor and forecast weather and environment for our nation, and which generates billions of dollars of annual revenues, is completely based on our ability to access international data when we need it in a format that we can use and with the necessary assurances that we can trust it. So we must share to receive. So thank you very much. These are the key messages that we have received. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatsuya. And I see many interesting questions coming through on the chat. Hopefully we can't deal with them now, obviously, in this forum, but hopefully we will have the opportunity to respond to them in another manner. So finally, I'm going to ask Deputy Secretary General of WMO, Dr. Elena Menenkova, to make some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Gerald. I'll stay in my place for the sake of saving some time, and I don't want to make concluding remarks. I would like to make closing remarks, because what I heard, it's like very far from conclusion. So I'm keeping convention just in front of my eyes, and my Secretary General keeps asking why I'm learning convention again. Convention says on the very first page, vital importance of the national meteorological, hydrological, and hydromet services in observing and understanding weather and climate and providing meteorological, hydrological, and related services in support of relevant national needs, which include protection of life and property, safeguarding the environment, sustainable development, and list goes on. That was written in the convention, which is very hard to change. So we have to stick to this, I believe. The question is that how? And I'm a long time in WMO, and in the past, WMO has a practice to issue annual statements or biennial statements on the role and operation of NMHSs. It took some time and effort to develop the statement of the current role at that time. Now we are talking on the future role and the constantly changing environment, constantly increasing playing ground with the different players. But what I felt is most essential in this conversation is that we are talking with diverse stakeholders. We have really proper conversation to talking with anyone and everyone who is part of this enterprise, who is part of this ecosystem. And of course, I cannot but repeat the important things which we all believe is very hard, very important for us. It's official, authoritative voice on early warnings, saving lives. It's a free access to public data and public information overall. And it's lots of partnerships with anyone around who wants or who is part of enterprise, because I think we believe that the century and a half of the existence of national services proven that they have something unique, and this unique needs to be preserved and strengthened. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena, for that. And with that, we come to the end of this high-level session. Thank you to all of you who have joined us, both here in the room and online, and have engaged. Thank you particularly to our panelists. Perhaps we'd give them a... So telling you that information, videos, photographs from this event will be available very shortly on the PPE website, part of the WMO website. So I'd like to formally close this third high-level session of the Open Consultative Platform, and to remind you of the kind invitation of the Secretary General to join him upstairs in a couple of moments. Thank you. Thank you.